This is a world filled with the mysterious creatures known to all as Pokemon. In every corner of this world, you'll find Pokemon. From the deep forests to the tall grass waving in the wind, from the expansive seas to the darkest of caves. But how do they live out their daily lives? How do they interact with their environments and with the other Pokemon surrounding them? Let's take a closer look at aspects of their lives you may never have learned about and discover the startling truth of their ecology and how they live. Howdy there, I'm Krillic, and there is arguably no other person more excited than I am to finally have this book in my hands and be prepared to bring you the information inside of it. I've taken the time to take pictures of every set of pages and organize the info throughout this video in chapters as we have in the book itself. This will cover the first 2 chapters of the book, as there's so much dense information and images that I have to split this up potentially even into 3 parts. But I can't wait any longer, so let's jump right in. We begin with their welcome to the world of Pokemon, which is actually what my intro was. Now though, Pokemon live in every possible habitat, adaptable and full of life. Their unique lifestyles have developed to suit their own particular environments. They survive and thrive, sometimes battling against one another, and at other times helping each other. By learning about the relationships between different Pokemon, you'll come to see how the great web of life connects them. Pokemon display all kinds of different physical adaptions that are tailored to the way they live. Learning about their morphology, their physical characteristics, will help you to better understand how they live. Some Pokemon possess mysterious abilities and shocking powers beyond our imagination. By learning about these capabilities, you can learn more about the ties binding together Pokemon and the world that surrounds them. A simple and great flyover that gets our brains cooking, thinking about all the different scenarios we've been introduced to and seen ourselves, whether it be through the manga, the anime, or the games, or anything else. But luckily, as we dig later into this book, there are plenty of Pokemon that we have not seen on the same routes within the games, and others you wouldn't expect to see near each other, interacting in many different ways. On to our next section, we are shown that the Pokedex has never been written by 10-year-olds, as many people like to claim, nor does it collect DNA as some others have claimed. This is no Omnitrix. Instead, we learn that a Pokedex is a compendium of data that has been compiled by observing or catching Pokemon. Within it, you'll find the results of all kinds of research and surveys. It is an essential item if you want to investigate Pokemon ecology. They then show the 4 steps to their scientific process: observation, measurement, experimentation, and analysis. And it really does make my heart sing to see this confirmed once and for all. They state Pokedexes sometimes look different or have different features included in them from one region to the next. Each Pokedex can contain different information about the ecology of different Pokemon. As you read and understand the information contained within a Pokedex, you'll come to understand more and more about Pokemon ecology. They then show us that there are many professors who have researched Pokemon ecology to date, all approaching the topic from their own unique viewpoints. It's actually surprising to me that we aren't shown the primary focus of each one, even though we already know them, but again, that's alright. They wanted to keep driving this forward and focus on Pokemon and the environment, true ecology. Pokedexes can tell us a lot about Pokemon ecology. When we talk about how a Pokemon lives within nature and the relationship between it and its environment, we call that its ecology. This book introduces you to the ecologies of many Pokemon based on the description of them found in the Pokedex. And now we start getting further bits of diagrams, like showing how when several Pikachu gather, their electricity can build and cause lightning storms, noting Pikachu to be intelligent, roasting hard berries with electricity to make them tender enough to eat, even showing to use electricity to knock them out of trees. This does lead me to something very important. It notes that texts found in these yellow boxes are all directly from the Pokedex. We'll see if I actually read them all, since it's just repeat info, and I want to really stick to showing and talking about all of these stronger ecology concepts. But as we continue, they proudly note that there are over 1,000 species of Pokemon. This means exactly as I have been stating, that Pichu and Pikachu are different species officially, and honestly, they kinda have always been. That's why they have different Pokedex numbers. I also love that they openly state new info is continuing to be discovered and added as time goes on. They then begin to explain how ecology is investigated through Pokemon, with 2 different approaches, studying many different Pokemon from a single perspective. We took a look at Pokemon that had descriptions written about their territories. When we did, we found that different species of Pokemon may have different ways to try and establish territory. Pictured are Strudel making their foul-smelling drawings all over an area, an Axew carving into a tree, and a Houndour howling as the sun sets. They also observed the different ways that Pokemon move through the water when they are swimming. When they did, they found that many Pokemon propel themselves along by jetting out water, as we then see with Clawitzer moving forward and Cloyster moving backwards. There are also generalities, as they observed how different Pokemon's feathers and wings function while flying. When they did, they found that the larger a Pokemon is, the slower its movements tend to be, compared to smaller Pokemon. Basically meaning larger wings, more force exerted, more air caught on those wings for gliding, it just generally becomes easier. Then there's relationships, studying Pokemon that live together in the same space, seeing that their proximity sometimes offered advantages, but sometimes it can also be disadvantageous. The prime example being Mantike, Mantine, and Remoraid, as they all help each other out regarding food and survival. When you look at a Pokemon's behaviors or the particulars of their morphology, you might find yourself wondering, why is it like that? There can be multiple explanations that might answer that question. Perhaps you might wonder, why does Swablu have such fluffy white wings? There are multiple ways you can approach answering that, as they've illustrated. They're so fluffy and white because it makes them look like clouds, which helps Swablu go unnoticed by foes. This info was extrapolated from the Dex, stating since Swablu looks like a cumulus cloud, foes can have a hard time finding it. Apparently, its wings turned white over many generations. They even have an illustration showing that Swablu may have originally had blue wings that would have slowly changed over the generations to this white wing, matching much closer originally to the blue feathering that it has on the rest of its body. Not only do we get to see a Talonflame from above, but also a Garchomp from below fail to recognize our bird as their next meal. We also know its wings are fluffy like cotton because they contain a great deal of air within them, making them light and fluffy to the touch. And it's important for it to bathe itself, grooming regularly in order to keep those wings bright and white to ensure their survival. But that was just our intro, their scientific method, if you would. Now it's time to really begin digging into the meat of the matter, our actual entree, if you would. Beginning with Chapter 1, How Pokemon Look. A huge number of Pokemon species have been discovered to date. Even among each species, individuals sometimes have different forms and appearances. Carefully observe these differences and you'll come to understand more about what is unique about that Pokemon. Let's dive right in. They start with different forms for males and females. Some Pokemon display such notable gender differences in their coloration or form that you can tell with a single glance whether they are male or female. For these kinds of Pokemon, it seems that it isn't only their appearances which differ, their roles and skill sets can also differ between males and females. The females within a pride of Pyroar work together to bring down prey, ensuring their pride doesn't starve, while the lead male watches the pride from a high location to ensure their safety. This last bit is not stated in the Pokedex at all, but they're understanding that the male Pyroar with the largest mane is the leader, and that lions will stand atop a high location to watch over their pride. They were able to come to this logical conclusion, which of course now makes it official within Pokemon, which I also believe was shown in animation. We get to see male and female Indeedee caring for a group of baby Pokemon. The female is noted through the Pokedex to be particularly good at babysitting, with 3 babies all tuckered out and asleep, while the male seems a little unhappy at first glance, but that's just the way male Indeedee look, as if they're looking through small glasses as well. And this one only seems to be taking care of 1 baby Pokemon by comparison, as males are more adept at being valets rather than babysitters. On the reflecting page, we're shown a number of differences between male and female Pokemon that exist within the games. Tusk and tooth size for Mamoswine and Golbat, antennae length in Meganium and Dustox, horn size in Houndoom and Seaking, body size for Scyther and Numel, whisker length in Alakazam and Kricketune, and the form of the center of Venusaur's flower are all ways to help us determine whether a Pokemon is male or female within the specific species. Different forms are necessary for different environments. Some Pokemon display differences in their appearance because they have adapted to best suit the environment they live in. When they have adapted in notable ways due to the region that they live, they may be called regional forms. Beginning with Executor, who of course has a short and stout form bearing psychic power, and the Alolan form, which now bears dragon powers. It doesn't say it here, but I wish this confirmed that ultra-necrozmus light was the reason for this. After all, we can find Alolan Raichu in the beach environment within Pokemon Snap, but Exeggutor is in its Cantonian form there. We're also shown Vulpix, who adapted over many years to gain power over ice. Small particles of ice fountain from the curly hairs on its head and tail, while Cantonian Vulpix has a fire burning within its body that makes it feel comfortably warm when you hug it. Quillfish, in its Hisuian form, existed thanks to the cold parts of the world where it lives offshore. Since their spikes are shorter but thicker than other regions' quillfish, they bash into foes with their bodies as their form of attack, as those quills are venomous. But our other quillfish sucks in water and uses the pressure generated in the act to shoot out toxic quills all at once from all over its body. This is not the intimidation tactic of our real-world pufferfish, it's a rechargeable explosion of quills. Galarian Meowth are shown hanging on center mast and breaking planks of wood as it climbs all over the boat. Its time at sea having toughened its body so much that parts of it have turned to iron, while Cantonian Meowth is noted that when it finds something that sparkles, the coin on its head also sparkles. This is not info found in the Pokedex, but again must have been noted at least in the anime. We do also get a scene of Galarian Farfetch'd breaking a large rock with a thick leek that is used to land heavy blows by comparison to the Cantonian Farfetch'd, who wields its own leek like a katana, both being of different sizes, likely having adapted their vegetables from different environments and nutrition levels themselves. And lastly, Wooper, who is usually found living near the water, having lost its habitat and being forced to change over a long period of time to then adapt to life on land, becoming the Paldean form covered in a poisonous film to protect its body. Though even regular Wooper does have a dex, noting that it has some poisonous film over its body. And they show us that Pokemon will develop different forms for different habitats, giving us 4 different Vivillon with patterns that blend into their environments. A tundra that of course blends with the snow, high plains for sandstorms, minor greenery, rocks and dirt, jungle for once again the ground floor and the dense greenery above, and then ocean to have the lower parts of its wings match with water and waves, while the upper half matches up with bright sunlight, which all grants a brand new perspective to me on how these Pokemon are able to camouflage themselves that I just didn't 100% understand before, which might even mean that the Pokeball pattern simply camouflages with Pokemon centers, as those specifically live in or near cities. The development of Ursaluna is also shown, with regular Ursaluna bearing a pattern on its forehead that looks like a full moon, its body being covered in mud as it walks around on all fours. But the mud covering hardens to be as tough as iron with the Blood Moon Ursaluna, who crossed the sea and drifted ashore into a new land. Surviving in this place allowed it to take on a unique appearance and special powers. Its forehead pattern turned red without clouds, and its left eye now allows it to see in the dark. They also don't state it here in the book, but this is a yokai transformation thanks to Kitakami also bearing Onagashima, which is why the whole events about Ogerpon and Petrons even happen here to begin with. They continue exploring that shellos from West and East Sea are found in warmer and colder waters in that respective order, though diet is said to possibly impact their colors as well. This of course helps explain what I've stated before, as we know that the colder water inhabiting East Sea shellos have their populations lowering overall, which is of course due to global warming and climate change. We're then shown the convergent forms of Diglett, Wiglet, Tentacool, and Toadscool, Pokemon that have taken on similar looking body shapes. For example, Diglett and Wiglet both living in holes that they dig, which likely contributed to why their body shapes are so similar. The last set of forms they dig into, no pun intended, are the forms that change over and over. Sometimes an individual Pokemon can display several different forms. When this happens, it is called a form change. A Pokemon that has changed forms might later return to its original form, or it might change into yet another different form. The first example they have is Castform and its many forms. Sunny, that has glowing skin that feels dried out, Rainy, who is soft and slightly swollen with water, and Snowy, who is entirely chilled with skin that is partially frozen. I don't think I've seen Castform being described as having skin, but I don't really know what else I actually expected. maybe for it to feel a little bit like rubber. But then again, I think the Pokedex does directly state skin, and my mind may have been trying to protect me by just erasing that idea. We're given these simple examples of Saucebuck and Oricorio through seasonal changes and the drinking of nectar, the many forms of Rotom causing trouble, Darmanitan switching between standard and Zen forms, our hangry little Morpeko, Giratina and its forms dependent on its location in our world or the Distortion world, and Malawetta using Relic Song. Nothing too crazy here, no new information, but of course tons of fun illustrations that I know become better later on with full page diagrams that we will get to today. Our next section is on Pokemon evolution. Most Pokemon are capable of evolution. When a Pokemon evolves, its name and its appearance both change. Many other aspects about it can also change, such as its types, the moves it can learn, how it moves about in the world, where it lives, and more. Learning about how a Pokemon evolves is key to understanding that Pokemon's ecology. Our first example is Magikarp and the dramatic change to Gyarados. Its type being changing, learning new moves, which I'd love to see, that little Magikarp barely holding onto a twig, while Gyarados snaps large pieces of wood. We're shown how they move around also changes, with Gyarados flying as Magikarp simply flops on land, and then their habitat change. Magikarp living in small ponds, and even large puddles, while Gyarados live in vast seas and lakes, thus explaining why they fly as they need to migrate to new locations. And yes, I do have a video all about Pokemon migration, and did already include Magikarp and Gyarados as a part of that. But moving forward, we have different forms through evolution, noted to be a fascinating subject to study. Some Pokemon might evolve differently depending on their gender, or based on some inherent quality they're born with, or based on the environment of the conditions surrounding them at the moment of evolution.
Prime example being Salandit, where only one gender can evolve. We see a group of males happily gifting berries to a Salazzle who is using her pheromones to make male Salandit infatuated with it bring it food. This then causes the males to never evolve due to their own malnutrition. Though Pokemon can also evolve based on innate characteristics, with most Dunsparce evolving into 2-segment form, the Dunsparce, while a 3-segment Dunsparce can happen, but that is only in a very rare scenario. One detail I didn't actually know personally is that a Toxel with natures such as Naughty, Adamant, and others similar to those will evolve into the Amped form, while those with natures like Timid and Bashful will evolve to be the Low-Key form. Pokemon even have different forms due to different evolution conditions. Certain Rockruff evolve while bathed in the setting sun of evening into dusk form Lycanroc. When bathed in bright sunlight of the day during evolution, they become midday, and then when bathed in moonlight due to evolving at night, they become the Midnight Lycanroc. It's really cute seeing the nighttime evolution because it's just this tiny little dog howling at the edge of a cliff. Meanwhile, sunset evolution is just staring out into the vast water like, man. Other Pokemon have differences based on where they evolved. Burmy changes form between its plant, sandy, and trash cloak depending on its environment. Actually, I have a little sandy cloak sitting right here on my desk because they're hiding away somewhere. I legit do not know where all 3 of my little Burmies are. That a female Burmy can then evolve into Wormadam, causing the cloak it is then wearing to become part of its body and never be removed again. But no matter which form the male Burmy takes, it will unfailingly evolve into Mothim. This reflects their real-world sexual dimorphism, which I recently covered in a video, as only male bagworms pupate and go through metamorphosis to become a moth. As we see through the Pokedex, slight vibrations also shake Milcery's cells that then cause it to evolve, giving it different flavors between 9 total different choices. They actually evolve with other factors such as time of day and how strongly shaken its cells are. When combined with 7 different varieties of sweets it can hold, there are a total of 63 different appearances that Alchemy can have. I also don't think I've noticed that entry before either, knowing that its living cells are specifically mentioned, which is a bit surprising considering Milcery is kinda just born from sweet particles in the air, so I never thought they would form complete cells as we know them. We also see the visual of a child stirring a concoction while Milcery has chosen the strawberry sweet from its array of choices, allowing it to choose what it wants to evolve into.
This leads us to differences arising from various conditions. Eevee can evolve into one of 8 different Pokemon based on the kind of evolution stone it is exposed to, the time of day when it evolves, how friendly it feels towards its trainer, and even what kinds of moves it knows, but nothing else is noted regarding its unstable DNA here. This chapter then ends with the many roles ears can play. Even the same body part can serve very different functions from one Pokemon to the next. For example, ears serve as an organ that allow many Pokemon to hear sounds, but some Pokemon's ears also serve other highly specialized functions. These are all Pokedex entry info pieces, but it is fun to compare them all. Audino, who uses the feelers on its ears to listen to heartbeats and check emotions and physical health of others, while also being able to hear a pebble rolling a mile away with radar-like ability. It's like it would be able to actually locate a Pokemon or person crying out for help then, and be able to help them, reaching them in quick time. Wartortle cleverly controls its furry ears and tail to maintain its balance while swimming through its surroundings. Fennekin, if worked up too easily and overheating, will use its ears to dissipate heat and calm down. Buttlebee ears are shovel-like, making them ideal not just for hearing predators approaching them, but also digging holes into the ground for safety. Baneri will even roll up its ears incredibly tight, then unleash them with enough force that it reduces entire boulders to dust, though it may just bound incredibly high into the air by striking the ground instead. Meanwhile, Noibat emits ultrasonic waves to search for fruit to eat, mistaking Applin for food sometimes. I will also add that they are even able to tell the quality of fruit using this ability. Lastly, Loudred ears serve as speakers, putting out sound waves powerful enough to blow away an entire house. But before we move on to more meaty diagrams and information like this one in Chapter 2, I just want to say thank you for watching. If you're new here, Pokemon Ecology and deep dives are everything that I do. So if you enjoyed this book and this video, then you're going to enjoy the deeper dives I create on this channel dedicated to Pokemon. I also want to thank members of the channel quickly. They ensure I can take the time to make quality content for everyone. If you want behind the scenes info, early access to videos, and members exclusive videos like this list that just got a new addition, what the teams I'd have as every single gym leader type, then become a member for as little as $3 a month. It makes a massive difference. Finally, as we go along, just let me know some great animal facts or any Pokemon Ecology info you might be surprised by. So far, I know we've only scraped the surface, and I'm so excited for more. Not only do I love reading your comments, they also appease the almighty algorithm alongside likes and hyping the video. So do those, and once again, thank you, and on with the video. Into Chapter 2, what is going to take up the majority of this video, how Pokemon live, beginning with how Pokemon obtain food for themselves. They of course need food to get the energy they require to live, but how they go about it can vary based on their lifestyles. In fact, there are an astounding number of different ways that Pokemon go about catching and collecting their food. As a Poliwhirl exits the water, its body secretes a mucus to keep its skin from drying out. It is on the search for bug Pokemon, of which we see a Kricketot in the background staying as still as possible to be sure that its antennae that make musical sounds do not ring out. In another place, an Aggron will dig with its hard horns through the ground, making tunnels as it breaks through bedrock on its search for iron that will only help it not only gain energy, but reinforce its horns, which will grow longer and stronger with age. Duskull will wander through towns in search of children and steal their life force. They can even pass through walls, ensuring there is no escape as a chill washes over their victim, siphoning life force from them. Though at least through the standards of Pokemon, this wouldn't kill anyone unless taken in excess. This life force is more like stamina that can be restored time and time again, thanks to multiple events in games and the anime clarifying this information, even within Legends ZA. Meanwhile, Morlul will search throughout forests for trees to attach to, making sure they don't all attach to the same tree and take away too many nutrients from it. They scatter little flickering spores, and during the day they dig their mycelium feet into the ground to absorb said nutrients from the roots of trees through the soil. This will eventually turn around as they will add other creatures who harm the forest to their list of food sources, and will even provide back to the trees they took nutrients from once they have evolved. It's just a greater version of the wood wide web we have in the real world, where mycelium and trees have positive and negative symbiotic relationships. A trapinch digs a nest and lies in wait, just like its inspiration, the antlion, waiting upwards of a week without eating anything.
Even Cubone has to watch its step and make sure it doesn't come tumbling down. If it does, it's almost a guaranteed death, as not only is the pit incredibly steep, but the trapinch will throw debris at those in its nest to cause them to fall further in until it can finally bite into the exhausted prey who have been trying to escape all this time. Scorpy will bury itself completely in sand, living in arid regions where it lies in wait for as long as a year for prey. When something does cross its path, it attacks with both venomous claw and tail. And an oblivious corefish misses the stunfisk lurking in the shallow waters, who is waiting for prey to step onto its hardened and mud-concealed body that will let loose a burst of electricity meant to incapacitate or even kill prey before it takes the time necessary to feed upon them. I did not think that corefish would be put onto the list of prey for this Pokemon, but it seemingly is an opportunistic eater, and they would be in the same areas, muddy, murky waters. So anything crossing Stunfisk's path may be in trouble by this information, and may be one of the few ways that corefish populations can actually be controlled. As we are blessed with the wide open smile of a Quagsire, we see it sitting at the bottom of a waterbed, or rather laying there, as oranberries slowly drift towards it. It is also opportunistic, simply waiting for anything and everything to float to its mouth so it can eat. Luckily, since it doesn't move much, it uses very little energy and doesn't get very hungry. Though even when it does move, it has such an easygoing personality that it will not even mind running into rocks as it swims along, much like other Japanese giant salamanders in the real world. After all, it had to get its dopiness from somewhere. The book then asks for us to take a look at all the different ways Pokemon approach getting their food. Some search it out, others lie in wait, some make traps while others try to fish up prey. However, pay special attention to how each Pokemon's unique morphology is particularly well suited for the way that they obtain food. We've already talked about these morphologies passively. The horns of Aggron, mycelium legs for Morello, a tiny body with a big toothy head for Trapinch, even Stunfisk, whose flat body is hardened to be able to take on the weight of a very heavy Pokemon without taking any damage. All very efficient towards their methods. This leads us into the ways in which Pokemon attack others, because as I have said many times before, every Pokemon is not an omnivore, and Pokemon do eat other Pokemon. Some may even try to attack humans. Every time that they eat sandwiches, berries, or other items from us is because they are injured or they're using it for power. They have a new domesticated diet. Well, quote-unquote domesticated, that's a whole different story. This is honestly then no different than animals that are doing what they absolutely must in order to survive, or have had their diets, changed due to a more domestic life. That is not their natural wild diet. And so we find Veluza stripping their skin from their bodies, filleting themselves so they can attack faster than their targets can escape, not that they've lost the extra weight. In this case, it is the Wiglets that it is attacking, who can retract underground after capturing their scent from 65 feet or 20 meters away. This then shows just how often Veluza has hunted Wiglet, and how Wiglet has adapted this olfactory scent to be able to escape in time. We see Swallow high above a Yanma, finding it easier to catch its prey by being able to swoop down on them so swiftly they won't even have the chance to notice you before you strike. But this Yanma may have already been aware of Swallow's presence, as it has adapted to be able to see in 360 degrees, likely due to many swooping birds attacking it throughout generations of its species' life. Kleavor has become so optimized for attacking that it is chopping entire trees in half and is able to finish off prey quickly, surprising a Bidoof that was gnawing on a tree that has now suddenly been sliced in two, and, well, the same might be said about Bidoof soon enough. But one pair of Pokemon I'm incredibly surprised to see interacting is an Electric wrapping itself around a Dino, attempting to paralyze it with the yellow spots on its side before chomping down on this dragon Pokemon. But in return, since Dino has poor eyesight, it already chomps down on anything and is currently chomping on Electric in order to fight back before it's too weakened by the shocking attack. On our next set, we have Pokemon that simply absorb energy from objects or living creatures. Glimmet absorbing nutrients from stone, Ferroseed absorbing minerals from rocks, and Varoom connecting itself to rocks and converting the minerals within into energy to fuel its activities. All because only the steel portion of Varoom is the real body, meaning it is only an engine with an intake and exhaust. In a scrapyard, we're accompanied by Klefki,
who is inserting its horn into pieces of metal to absorb the metallic ions from them. I always imagined that this would eventually cause the metal to corrode and wither away. But nearby, we also see Meltan, whose body circulates liquid metal within itself to generate energy as it searches for more iron to absorb. At night, we see a mischievous floating in the air, causing distress to others as their fear is food for mischievous. It has to diligently practice its scare tactics in order to make sure it can continue to frighten others and absorb said fear for sustenance. Meanwhile, in more polluted areas, we find Galarian Wheezing sucking in polluted air with its mouth and releasing clean air from its head. From the perspective of Galarian Wheezing, who is only interested in dirty air, it is basically expelling the stuff it has no need for as far away as possible. After all, it doesn't want to accidentally suck in clean air by releasing it too close to itself. That's why it has such a long smokestack at the top of its head, though there are some toxins that will still leak out from its main body before being cleaned. So we need to stay away from those, and it will eventually suck those in as well to be purified. Then we find Galarian Corsola extending their ghostly and corporeal branches from their body so they can feed on life energy from anyone that touches said branches. Otherwise, it lies there much like a rock, waiting to be kicked and then to steal life force from those that accidentally kicked it. Some Pokemon make use of scents to attract their prey. For example, Gloom seems to release drool, but this is actually a nectar that attracts more than just insects, as we not only see a Wurmple, but also a Shroodle attracted to it, both of which it will attempt to turn into prey. And if that doesn't work, then the strong smell that can reach further than a mile or 1.5 kilometers away will just attract more prey eventually. Unfortunately, every rose does have its thorns, as Roserade presents its flowers while cloaking itself within a bush of them, releasing a sweet scent that attracts a ribbon bee that will soon be lashed by Roserade's poisonous whips that will poison, bind, then end the life of this Pokemon, being then turned into fertilizer for this plant. Thanks to natural bioluminescence, there are Pokemon such as Lantern who are capable of creating lights to attract prey. When the bacteria living inside of its antennae have a chemical reaction to Lantern's bodily fluids, it produces a powerful light. Meanwhile, Chinchou will light up to tell others to stay away from its turf. Unfortunately, Lantern wins this, and Wishy-Washy are attracted to Lantern, soon to become its dinner. In the night, though, we find Inkay flashing lights in a complex rhythm alongside Malamar to draw in prey while communicating with one another. In a surprising turn of events, Oddish was attracted here, believing it was moonlight to absorb. Squid in the real world do not eat any plants, and these Inkay don't seem to be too excited to see the Oddish, so it seems like nobody was happy with this current outcome. It is really cool though to see them upside down so their upper bodies blend with the night sky, which is something I had never thought about before. We then see Slowpoke, who have adapted so its tail looks more like a worm or other similar food stuff, at least to fish, all while sweetness seeps from it whenever that tail is soaked in water, allowing it to lure in Pokemon as it fishes for a meal. They do often forget they're fishing for prey at times, resulting in them spending the entire day absolutely lost in thought. But if a Shelder attracted to the scent comes by, it will bite on, and we'll find ourselves with a Slowbro. Since they live in similar colder environments from time to time, we also see Ice-Q in the background. The ice balls at the top, or rather tip, of their singular hair can be used to fish up prey, and it isn't just an exposed nerve ending, giving purpose for Ice-Q to not always have that giant block on its head. Traps that are set by Galvantula, who will employ electrically charged webs, wait until prey is caught in said web and then immobilized by the shock, including a Swoobat that appears despite all dex entries only stating that Galvantula only eats birds or baby chicks that are not good at flying. This was one that I'm very happy was confirmed for me, since I never believed for even a second that Galvantula only ate birds while living inside of caves. One of the most famous of examples you may already know about is an Ariados attaching threads to the bodies of prey and releasing them, allowing them to lead it to greater colonies of prey as it follows behind. Here we do see the thread attached to a single Toedscool, Ariados above and out of sight so it doesn't run too fast from being scared. But even worse is that Gengar is sitting in the shadow of another Toedscool, waiting for its own moment to strike its prey. Of course, there are many different adaptions available for Pokemon, each one having to overcome the limits of their previous form. In the case of Nosepass, it is a slow-moving Pokemon that still needs to dig up metal for consumption, or even eat Pokemon made of metal. Here we see it using its many noses that are controlled via magnetic forces to try and take away the precious hammer of a Tinkatink who is very unwilling to let it go. Despite this, the Probopass is not directly attacking these small Pokemon, clearly only interested in the metal hammer. But it also shows that Probopass does indeed eat berries as well, with one of the noses returning with a berry balanced on its head. Sobble, sitting on an underwater branch, shoots berries from a tree to knock it down and get its food, with both Remoraid and Horsey doing the same. Though they are all eating berries, we would also know they and their evolved forms do hunt for other Pokemon as prey, just like we would see in their real-life counterparts. A Silcoon must endure hunger as it is unable to eat, and it uses its silken body to produce what initially looks like spikes, but is rather also a silk that is used to tether itself to branches to prevent itself from falling. Then, at least it could stay out of sight of predators that might try to eat it. Also, if we flip it upside down, it actually kind of looks a little happy and a little cute. Morning Dew is seen to gather on its silk and on the underside of Sunkern's leaves, both Pokemon surviving on very little water to drink. Our more outwardly violent Pokemon such as Cranidos, Clobbopus, and Crabrawler all have different methods to obtain the same goal. Clobbopus punches anything it sees, Crabrawler specifically punches trees, and then Cranidos headbutts and breaks the trees, all of them then feeding on the berries that land on the ground afterwards from their various methods. And in a twist of fate, and the second time Sylveon has been clearly depicted alongside the Hydreigon line, we see it using its ribbon-like feelers to calm down Zweilous, whose heads are usually squabbling at all times. The scary part here is we don't know if this is good-natured and actually just calming them down or not, because this tactic is used by Sylveon to calm down hostility in prey before it strikes them. Speaking of then, ambush predators are all over Pokemon, with Cloth being one of them, waiting on a cliff and waiting until prey appears, dropping down to attack with more power and catching them off guard. Unfortunately, because it is facing downwards in weight, it can't stay like this forever, as blood will rush to its head. A happy roly-poly acts similarly to a lawnmower as it spins its wheel across grassy fields, getting said grass caught up and tangled in its wheels, which it will then consume later on. You can tell where they've been by looking at the roots of grass that are left behind. And much like the firehawks of Australia, we see Fletchender scattering embers in tall grass to force insects into fleeing from inside of those grasses. If they stay in the fire, they perish. If they escape, they are likely eaten. There is no safety for them all, so you can only hope by gathering in large numbers, a few of you can escape. In opposite to this, we see Cramorant diving into the water to catch Arrokuda. Unfortunately, it often gets a little too excited and tries to swallow those fish whole, which then causes Arrokuda to get caught in Cramorant's throat, only to be spat out later. As a small note, the book states we can look at other pages here and there to see, in this case at least, Pokemon that work together to gather food or trick their prey, which we will have to get to in the future. When it comes to searching out food to eat, Pokemon can take all kinds of different approaches. They don't just search with their eyes. Many use various other parts of their bodies to sense food and use the data they gather to then search it out. Beginning with pigs, Tepig will use its nose to sniff out food, but so will Lechonk, who is noted to only eat highly fragrant wild grasses and berries. Swinub will rub its snout on the ground to dig up food, but may even occasionally dig up hot springs. Female Nidoran will follow scents carried on the wind, and even insects are known to use their sense of smell in different ways, as Heracross uses its massive antennae to detect smells and search out sweet sap, while Weedle uses its acute sense of smell with that big red nose it has to search out its favorite leaves and eat its own weight in leaves every day. Noibat is of course noted to use ultrasonic waves to search for food, now noting that it picks out the ripe ones with the use of its sonar. Then of course there are plenty of other various ways to sense food. Cutiefly, who scents the aura of flowers that are about to bloom and gather near them to then collect their pollen and nectar. A Drowsy uses its big nose to snuff out a good dream, with positive happy dreams tasting better as it will often search for younger Pokemon. likely because they aren't burdened by, depression and anxiety, which makes dreams taste awful. If a drowsy does eat your dream, then you won't even remember what kind of dream it was, which is really messed up, since this is happening to a Cubone in this illustration, an incredibly depressed and grieving Pokemon who has very little joy right now. Like, couldn't you just go after a different Pokemon? Couldn't you just let Cubone be happy? We have plenty of Pokemon who use various antennae, horns, or protuberances to notice changes in their environments and hunt their prey. Antennae on Venipede to determine locations and movements of prey through air vibrations. Trumpet's horn, which can detect and be used to feed on the feelings of envy and malice. Antennae on Dustox as generic radars. Whiskers on Whiscash, which do provide a sense of smell, just like real catfish, even in the muddiest of waters. And then the protuberances on Garchomp's head that act as sensors to even detect far away prey. But as I've stated many times, not every Pokemon eats everything, yet there are some who are not just omnivores, but true omnivores, something that we hardly see in a natural diets of our world. Some Pokemon are perfectly happy eating rotten food or the garbage put out daily by humans. They appear to have very strong organs and astounding digestive abilities. These wondrous Pokemon contribute to keeping the environments around them and us clean. It's very, very nice to see even more confirmation that poison Pokemon are here to help clean up our mess, much like a number of other Pokemon, such as Guzzlord, poking out from an ultra wormhole who is noted to eat anything and everything. We also know that they are one of the only Pokemon confirmed to not poop, while many other Pokemon do. You'd be surprised at how often I get comments of people saying, well, not every Pokemon poops, only like 4 or 5 are confirmed to poop. And it's just like, do you really want Pokemon to constantly talk about defecating? Is that what you're into? Anywho, Alolan Grimer often found in congregations and waste disposal sites. The tiny bits that look like teeth are actually crystallized lumps of purified toxins. We see Wimpod moving at high speeds and eating everything in front of them, leaving only perfectly cleaned grounds in their wake. Though their habitat does vary from beaches to seabeds, so with it being a natural scavenger, it can gleefully chow down on anything, anywhere without a problem. In similar manner, Munchlax will eat anything that is remotely edible, consuming its own weight in food every single day, even if the food is rotten. This then helps it develop a better immune system as a Snorlax that is then capable of eating muck, as though it were just a spicy bit of food. And then Gulpin, whose small heart and brain is only made up for via the stomach that makes up the majority of its body, filled with incredible enzymes that dissolve anything. The gas it does expel from its body is noted to be incredibly foul, and with such a large mouth, it can swallow down objects as large as its entire body, not limiting itself to food or detritus, but going as far as brooms, balls, and everything else according to this diagram. Some Pokemon are also able to gain energy from sunlight. They might use that light to carry out photosynthesis or to generate electricity. Since sunlight comes streaming down from above all day long, these species don't have to travel about searching for food. This is probably a fairly efficient lifestyle for them. Sunflora, just like any sunflower, is always looking in the direction of the sun. Accompanying it are Serperior and Ivysaur here, who also bathe in the sun, as Ivysaur itself is noted to do so to help the bud on its back grow. Turtwig is shown sleeping as its entire body performs photosynthesis, and next to it is a wide-awake Leafeon who has clean air constantly enveloping it as it itself performs photosynthesis, likely guarding the little turtle since it doesn't need to eat it for its own sustenance. Meanwhile, we find the desert to be the perfect place for a Pokemon like Helioptile to generate electricity, as there are no obstacles to block the sunlight from reaching it. They spread out the frills on their heads to generate electricity, and their heads will then glow brightly while they are generating power. It's such a strong trait of theirs that they need no other food as long as they can photosynthesize, despite not being a plant themselves. But energy isn't the only thing that food can be turned into. In the case of Turtonator, it eats sulfur and other minerals, with this then providing the basis for its explosive shell and its explosive dung. Once again, to this day, still very surprised that people believe Pokemon do not poop. It is guaranteed that even if I provide proof, unless someone is holding a fantasy turd in their hands, they will not believe Pokemon poop at all, unless it is explicitly stated.
But back on track, Sableye not only eats rocks, but the substances in the rocks will then crystallize and rise to the surface of Sableye's skin as gems, which I honestly only ever remember Sableye eating gems and then forming those gems on its body, but this makes way more sense, as it can still eat for energy, and the byproducts aren't turned into, defecation, but instead said gems form on its body. But what if there's an excess of food or a lack thereof within the world of Pokemon? Considering it isn't always possible to secure a steady supply of food, there are Pokemon that prepare for this eventuality in different ways. Some Pokemon may take actions such as storing food in their bodies or hiding it in trees. This ensures they can have food whenever they want or need it. Greedent will eat an immense amount of food. Even its previous form will constantly stuff its cheeks. If it doesn't have anything in its cheeks, then it actually grows anxious. Meanwhile, back with Greedent itself, it wraps up berries within its tail, which is twice the length of its body, to then carry those berries around. Any berries that fall out will just feed other Pokemon, such as the Munchlax here. Shuckle stores berries inside of its case-like shell, and said berries will eventually ferment and become delicious and thick pulpy juice that even humans will actively drink. Pick-a-Peck will create holes where it can keep its food, all while pecking at a rate of 16 times per second, using them for food storage and nesting. But when they move out, there are others like Emolga who will move in. We also see a small cluster of Smoliv toddling around on the ground. The olive-like growth on their head is where they store their nutrients for the future. Kind of like a camel, now that I think about it. And any storage of food made by Pachirisu will also be stored with fur balls that crackle with static electricity to deter any thieves from taking their hard-earned favorite foods. They're shown to be working in pairs as they hide their berries within holes inside of trees. Our next section is a song to my heart, as we look at how Pokemon populations boom and burst. It appears that Pokemon populations can be greatly affected, either growing or shrinking, based on factors like whether they face much predation or whether they can secure enough food sources for themselves. A strong example being how a boom of Lapras, thanks to conservation efforts, has now resulted in there being too many predators. Now, prey species such as Wishiwashi have been greatly diminished. The book doesn't note it, but if these Lapras don't move around as we know they are apt to do, then their populations will drop to what the local environment is able to support, and both predator and prey populations will likely then stabilize. But non-predator populations can boom as well, as is the case with Phoebus, who look so ragged that they are assumed to taste bad by all creatures, thus resulting in their numbers continuing to grow without limit, especially since they are noted to be an incredibly hardy species able to live effectively anywhere. Yet somehow we don't see many melodic in the world, making me assume that they are not only deep-sea creatures as we see with the real-life counterpart of the oarfish, but also that they adapted to have this shoddy creature, this previous form, as a way to ensure that their species can still continue to thrive, because it's a less obvious, less colorful form that predators wouldn't immediately be attracted to. Even though typically very bright colors will also typically mean that it's toxic, but there are plenty of other creatures that will mimic these colors, like the coral snake. When two different species of Pokemon consume the same kinds of food, it can actually lead to competition. The Pokemon that fails to secure their food supply may decrease in number. Garbodor is a victim of this thanks to the presence of Alolan Grimer, but we also know that Alolan Grimer and Muk actively hunted and would eat Trubbish and Garbodor thanks to their introduction to, of course, Alola. And then we have Corphish, who can live even within impure water, allowing it to thrive in areas where it would then have to compete with less Pokemon for food thanks to this adaptation, and allowing their population to steadily increase. They dominate the food supply while Pokemon such as Lotad need cleaner homes to live in, then seeking new homes and letting the Corphish go uncontested for longer periods of time. Pokemon can have different temperatures at which they are most comfortable living. The body temperature of a given Pokemon may be influenced by the unique characteristics of their bodies and the environments they live in. We see many adaptions that allow different species to regulate their temperatures and keep them just right. Our first set we will find within scorching environments that are far too dangerous for our bodies. A colossal bearing a body that burns at over 2700 Fahrenheit or 1500 Celsius scattering coal from its back, which burns bright red to intimidate opponents. While not noted directly to live in hot environments, by living in environments that are of similar temperature, it helps them, and many other Pokemon, maintain their own body temperatures for their health. Similar things can then be applied to Numel, who has a body temperature upwards of 2200 Fahrenheit or 1200 Celsius, and a Camerupt who has a volcano inside of its body. Magma of 18,000 Fahrenheit or 10,000 Celsius courses through its body and will erupt every 10 years, or rather, if it gets angry, which is not a rare event, by the way. Everyone typically knows Magcargo's body temperature is equal to the surface of the sun at 18,000 Fahrenheit or 10,000 Celsius, but what keeps us safe is the shell, where most of this heat is potentially stored. It is cooled and hardened lava, but is also fragile and breaks very easily. All the while Sizzlipede is here in the background, here to intake the many gases produced due to the heat and other Pokemon, storing the gases within its body to generate heat for itself. Magby simply has a high body temperature clocked at 1100 Fahrenheit or 600 Celsius, and Darmanitan takes advantage of hot environments as the hotter it gets, the more powerful it is. By itself, its fire can reach 2500 Fahrenheit or 1400 Celsius, which I do wonder if we could superheat a Darmanitan and cause it to reach a new evolution as it learns to manage even higher temperatures for more power. In antithesis to the heat, we of course have cold bodies within Arctic regions of the world, Auroras, who have a surface temperature of negative 250 Fahrenheit or negative 150 Celsius, meaning our hands would freeze to it on contact due to any minute moisture we have on our skin. They can block enemy attacks by creating a wall of ice with the freezing air emitted from its diamond-shaped crystals. They seem to be contributing to the cold environment overall, which we can expect of many Pokemon once again. After all, the environment and Pokemon do fuel each other. Speaking of, through the icy scales mixed with chilled air, Frostmoth is able to whip up snowstorms. While not noted here, this is essential because Frostmoth is very protective of its babies, Snom, who rely on camouflage and have a diet of snow. The temperature of their wings go below negative 290 Fahrenheit or negative 180 Celsius. Now, of course, the body of Regice is entirely made up of ice, but is specifically from ice of a previous ice age, meaning that Regice should have been created somewhere within the era in which Mamoswine would have been running around freely before going mostly extinct. It cloaks itself with frigid air of negative 328 Fahrenheit or negative 200 Celsius. Things will freeze solid just by going near this Pokemon, and its body is so cold that it will not even melt if it is immersed in lava, which is incredibly impressive. Another Pokemon that freezes its body with ice is Kyurem, something it does to stabilize its cellular structure. At its lowest extremes, its body temperature can drop below negative 450 Fahrenheit or negative 270 Celsius, which is a massive deal considering it has even greatly affected the ecology around the giant chasm to match its own cold self, being one of the only places where we do find truly wild Mamoswine. Among the many species of Pokemon discovered, some can even display extreme body temperatures themselves. Most of them produce fire or chilled air within their very bodies. Some might temporarily change body temperature in the heat of battle or give off heat from one part of their body. The first of which is Reshiram, its body growing hotter in battle amongst other Pokemon we'll soon discuss, its tail glowing brightly with flames as it burns hot enough to change the world's weather as it flies like a jet plane, flames spewing from its tail. Typhlosion's fur can rub together to create explosions. Doing so on purpose can of course cause massive explosions, though a temperature doesn't seem to be specifically noted. And when Blazebreed Paldean Tauros is heated by fire energy, its horns can get hotter than 1800 Fahrenheit or 1000 Celsius. Those gored by them will suffer both wounds and burns. Others, such as Toucanon, only look angrier thanks to the fact that their beaks will heat up in battle and glow red as it exceeds 212 Fahrenheit or 100 Celsius, causing severe burns whenever it hits. Right now, it seems to be attacking a Primeape that likely got too close to its nest or its food. Afterwards, when it cools down, it emits steam from its nostrils. This is amazing to note
because there are tons of animals that do not sweat and have to resort to alternative methods to cool down, something we'll get to in this video. We get to see male Pyroar again, its mane glowing with a 3600 Fahrenheit temperature or 2000 Celsius temp, as it is acting against those that would threaten its pride. It's an amazing deterrent, as even approaching it with its mane in this state will cause severe burns. And as we see with a gradient stealing some fatty berries that Charcadet needs to fuel its flames, it prepares for battle and causes its body to glow while rising to over 1800 Fahrenheit or 1000 Celsius. It's definitely eating a Chople berry, by the way, which is ironic because that lowers damage when hit by a super effective fighting type move, of which Charcadet cannot even get hit by, but it is also described as a berry that generates heat to the point where you can even feel it in the flesh, making it valuable in cold environments. So even to these tiny details within the art, we find that everything is accounted for and makes sense. Also, for some reason, Cubone is consistently used as prey in these diagrams, probably because it is seen as weak and vulnerable without parents in the wild to help protect it, but nature cares not if you are loved or not, it only cares for who will live long enough to bear children. And so this Centiskorch heats its body to about 1500 Fahrenheit or 800 Celsius, and then lashes out using its body as a whip, searing its foes. This temp is obtained through the visible yellow organs on its segments, and as the body heat grows, so too will the flames on its head, turning its prey to charcoal effectively. As a great example on both sides of fire and ice, we have Darumaka and its Galarian form. Darumaka living in warm environments have internal flames of 1100 Fahrenheit or 600 Celsius, where it derives power from. If that fire dwindles, then it will immediately fall asleep, which both forms of Darumaka do tuck their arms and legs in to sleep. Though in counter, the flame organ in its Galarian form has atrophied. Now a cold organ sits within its body, and the colder the environment, the more energetic they are. So many fire types seem to eat plenty of food or fatty foods to fuel their flames, as is the case with Pignite as well, and when its internal fire flares up, its movements grow sharper and faster. I also kind of feel bad for the Gradient that is attempting to steal some of those berries, because this Pignite seems to have quite the stash, and is probably going to have some incredible flames and speeds. And once again, by contrast, we have Vanillux, who drinks large amounts of water and creates snow clouds inside of its body, their temperatures being roughly 21 Fahrenheit or -6 Celsius, and if angered, they will cause violent blizzards, contributing to the cold environment. I also love the little ice cube just kind of being swept along in this little image, just floating, doing its thing peacefully. For Pokemon to live comfortably, it is important that they're able to maintain their ideal body temperature even if the air temperature around them changes. Some might only use their bodies to pull this off, while others might rely on environmental features like the heat from the ground or sunlight. There are even Pokemon that rely on others within their species to help them keep their body temperature just where they like it. Glaceon is freely able to control its body temperature, lowering its body heat to freeze its fur, making it sharp enough to deal damage in an attack even. It reaches as low as -75 Fahrenheit or -60 Celsius. Once again, we find Fennekin venting off heat at 390 Fahrenheit or 200 Celsius to prevent itself from overheating. And then Duraludon, who needs to release heat from its body as it naturally retains heat, venting it out in attacks such as against a Druddigon that got in the way when Duraludon was trying to feed. Other Pokemon have temperature regulating methods pre-installed per se, not needing to do anything to help regulate themselves. This is the case for a seal, who has thick fat allowing it to travel through cold seas without a problem, but they do get worn out in warmer seas of course. It will break up ice as it swims in the sea with the point on its head. Something similar is said for Walrein, who shatters ice with its thick tusks, but its thick blubber even allows it to bounce back attacks. Even Scatterbug is able to live in any region or environment thanks to the powder that covers its body, helping regulate its body temperature. Though in order to maintain this powder, it needs to eat poisonous leaves and roots. This powder also serves as a deterrent that causes paralysis on contact, keeping birds at bay. Other Pokemon are covered in various amounts of fur. For example, the fur around the waist of Diggersby retains heat so exceptionally that heavy winter clothing is made by humans using fur shed by this Pokemon. Mareep similarly has a fluffy coat that sheds its fleece once in the summer but grows back fully within a week. For extra insulation, static electricity will cause the coat to double in size, trapping insulating air within it that will prevent Mareep from becoming too hot or too cold in summer and winter. Once hot seasons are over, Lopunny's coat will be replaced with fur that holds a lot of insulating air in preparation for cold weather, changing twice a year overall and protecting its extremities, such as its ears, hands, and feet from the cold weather and frostbite. Conversely, Flareon generates so much heat that it actually has to fluff out its fur to bring down its body temperature. It usually stays around 1300 to 1500 Fahrenheit or 700 to 800 Celsius. But when agitated, the flame sac inside its body ignites and can reach temperatures of up to 1650 Fahrenheit or 900 Celsius. An extreme example of having great insulation, I mean godly insulation even, is through the armor-like hide of Rhydon, which is so incredible that it can walk completely through magma without a singular problem. Sometimes a Pokemon doesn't have the capacity to change its body temperature at will and doesn't have a biological adaptation that immediately resists or helps them manage their temperature. This then results in Pokemon that may have some smaller adaptations, but have ultimately found a way to use the environment itself to manage their temperature. Considering Krokorok likes it hot, but often lives in desert environments where the temperature drops at night, we find it digging underground while it sleeps to stay warm, all while its head stays above the sand similarly to a crocodile in water. Fuecoco uses those craft singles it has on its body to absorb heat, but in order to even do so effectively, it has to bask in the sun on a nice warm rock as you would expect of many reptiles. Then Gibble can be found crowding around small caves together, huddling together to stay warm as they prefer warmer temperatures and had been adapted to warmer climates. Strange then that the first place we find them in is Sinnoh, considering it is noted to be a fairly cold climate in that region. Sometimes though, it isn't all about the Pokemon and not just their younger children, but moreover eggs, as is the case with Leavanny, who not only makes clothes to keep Sawada warm, but also pushes together leaf litter, which decomposes, and as it triggers fermentation, a warmth softly is provided to the egg before it. And once again, we have more lizards, as both Sceptile and Druddigon will absorb sunlight in order to regulate their body temperatures. This is even more important for Druddigon, who stops being able to move if the temperature falls too far, as it lives in some regions where it can get cold, giving us another reason as to why in winter within Unova, we see them move into enclosed spaces like Dragon Spiral Tower or within caves. And Dugong are technically back, as we talked about Seal earlier, as Dugong then stores thermal energy within its body, helping it fight off the cold when it does enter the water. It's always best to have multiple methods to keep yourself safe and happy after all. Though there are some that are technically unaffected by body temperature due to their abilities. Garchomp, in fact, moves so fast from its warm dens within underground layers or thermally active zones that it can quickly make a meal of those Swinub before moving back to its home. It's assumed that they likely would be unable to move well if their bodies become too cold. Meanwhile, Cryogonal's body simply melts, and it becomes steam if it becomes too warm. It's very important to note that Cryogonal does not die as part of this process, as we would expect of Vanillish. It just loses its physical body, and it will return once it cools. When Pokemon venture outside of their normal habitat because they are searching for food, are lost, or exploring, or maybe even made a friend and a fellow trainer, we see them manipulating the environment to better suit themselves. Frigibax will use the power of its dorsal fin to cool the inside of its nest like a refrigerator. It's able to do this as it absorbs heat through it and then converts that heat into ice energy. So the hotter the area, the colder the ice it can produce for itself to then stay healthy and comfortable. And of course, Alolan Vulpix will spray ice shards with its 6 tails that at least here it adorably rolls in as a process to keep itself cool. But not everyone likes it cold, instead they may prefer to keep things warm. As a result, Toxapex will enclose itself within its 12-legged bunker to trap its own body heat inside and survive the cold waters of Galar, doubling as a way to prevent itself from being pushed around by the tides. In the background, we find a Magmar lighting stones on fire to give itself a warm place to rest. It might even go as far as turning these stones to magma, since when tired, these Pokemon will soak their bodies in said magma to ease any weariness they have, much like a bath at the end of the day. Something nice and warm to relax the muscles. But Pokemon don't have to do all of this alone. In fact, there are plenty of Pokemon who are friendly with each other and will help each other out in their times of need. pairs of toucanen aren't only seen as symbols of companionship, but they will use their beaks to help warm each other up as well. The number of times they clack their beaks together and how hard they hit allows them to communicate with others of their kind. The tapping of beaks in similar fashion is a legitimate toucan behavior, by the way. We see a small huddle of ladybug keeping each other warm, something you could expect of many insects within our world if they stay above ground. And this body temp regulation doesn't stop at Pokemon. We are part of nature too, my dear viewer, and so we might borrow the help of our friends. In this case, a Vanillite is hugged by a child on such a warm day to help her stay cool. And later, if it's too warm, Vanillite can also produce a small amount of snow for a fun and colder time outside. Similarly to our Ladybug and our Vanillite, we see a group of Ice-Cube also huddling together as they take turns pressing their ice against each other to help keep each other cool on a warmer than usual winter day, all while a Fletchling is cuddled up in the arms of a boy whose clothing is made up of some Stoutland fur that is very cold resistant. But that Fletchling isn't there to stay warm, it's actually there because it also provides warmth to the boy due to its high body temperature. Whether the cycle of day and night, the phases of the moon, tidal patterns, or the changing of the seasons, the world is full of phenomena that adhere to set rhythms that repeat over and over. Pokemon may also live according to these rhythms, and it seems they can affect when Pokemon become active, or rest, or otherwise change their behavior. The first case you may have thought of is Hoot Hoot, slowly tilting their heads further and further each day, following a certain rhythm as they serve as a sort of clock. A special organ within their body allows them to sense the Earth's rotation and allows them to hoot at precisely the same time every day. Speaking of time of day, we live in environments that undergo changes in light, temperature, and more, all according to a certain rhythm. By aligning their own activities with these rhythms, Pokemon can work more efficiently to gather their food or work together with their fellows. These rhythms are especially important for Pokemon that make use of light from the sun or moon. A clear case we find is in Lunatone and Solrock, Pokemon that rely on the light of the moon and the light of the sun in order to function at maximum capacity, becoming stronger in the light of these celestial bodies. But this dives even further into things such as the lunar phases, an Umbreon becoming empowered by the light of the full moon as the ring patterns on its body glow, thanks to this, or whenever it gets excited. Even without the moon, it is able to see in pitch darkness, making it a nocturnal Pokemon through and through. Conversely to this, we have the new moon, a moment in which we see no moon at all and light is not provided to us. On these scary nights, we find ourselves encountering Darkrai more often, who will chase people and Pokemon from its territory by giving them nightmares. These moon cycles go as far to affect tidal patterns, further affecting resources such as food, habitat, and more. We see Binacle attached to rocks that are then able to take advantage of a higher tide that brought seaweed to their doorstep. Now they cooperate to gather and eat this food before the tide returns lower. They, as we have discussed earlier with other Pokemon, might even store this food or eat a greater fill so they can survive the low tide later this month. Speaking of, in low tide, we see Marshtomp playing around in the mud that its body has become incredibly adept at traversing. In the background, we see Cradily wandering around, searching for Pokemon on land and digging up prey buried in the sandy beaches before dissolving it and eating it with their tentacles. No matter the time of day, our world is teeming with life, each Pokemon thriving in their best conditions and adapting to the changes in the world around them, often building patterns of their own. Much like you would expect to see rabbits more often around sunrise or sunset, or even watch a bird visit the same bird bath every day, Pokemon also follow their own habits and rituals as part of their day and night rhythms. Cacturne will remain unmoving during the day so as to not lose any moisture to the harsh desert sun. At night, when it is cooler, it becomes more active, stalking prey that it has locked onto. With the heat of the sun and many other factors affecting the movement of wind and overall weather patterns, Drifblim only drifts where the wind takes it, allowing it to end up anywhere at all, really. Your day and nights are not the only times when Pokemon are most active, as I hinted at with real-world rabbits. We actually find Swanna dancing at dusk in perfect sync to strengthen their unity. Their leader of the flock is right in the center of their group. They'll all learn to listen and respond to each other in the water here, so they can do so even better during their migration. And of course, plenty of plant Pokemon will gather together in broad daylight to absorb sunlight.
with Snivy wandering around, Sunflora rushing around in a hectic manner for as long as the sun is out, Sunkern bounding behind them, and even a Cherrim opening up its flower petals as it blooms and attracts pollinators to it. And would you look at that? We have a female Combee who may have even served as Cherrim's little pollinator here. Though not every Pokemon uses direct sunlight to help produce food via photosynthesis. In the case of Rowlet, it builds up energy to allow it to fight better at night when it is on the prowl for prey. Or within the corners of our woods, underneath the safety of trees, we find Oddish underground where they can escape the sunlight that burns them. They will emerge at night when the light is softer and take their fill for their own photosynthesis, something that is done by a great number of plants even in our world. As it does shift to night, we do find a new slew of Pokemon actively enjoying the world around them. Dugong have slept during the day and can now play at night, or even look for food without worrying about overheating, being happy in the icy waters. Otherwise, it will swim under shallow ocean waters where the temperature is colder and regulated. Meowth sleeps during the day, becomes more active at dusk, but then at night, it is fully active and wandering the city on its search for loose change. Meanwhile, there are small details like a Cherrim now covered in its overcast form, not only conserving heat, but also blending in better with the night to avoid predation. Gathering above the same pond then nearby are Clefairy, Volbeat, and Illumis, all performing their own dance of sorts. Clefairy being known to come out during the night of a full moon and gathering from all over to bathe in said moonlight, as they are even able to float thanks to its power. Volbeats are competing with their lights and dance patterns in an attempt to woo the singular Illumis so they can mate later on. But unfortunately, we know one Volbeat that won't be getting lucky, as it is heftily distracted by the movements of the Cherrim nearby. The Sunflora we saw earlier are sleeping nearby, petals closed and arms crossed to conserve energy and heat. Something similar then can also be said about Combee, as they rest in hives composed of each other, rather than the traditional hive you'd expect of the real world. This is, though, unfortunate because this makes them the perfect target for Mothim, who now come in the night to steal honey away from them. But if I were that Mothim, I would watch out, because nearby we do see Honchkrow flying with a small flock of Murkrow nearby, now active at night and searching for their next meal. And they aren't the only ones on the prowl. The more active Oddish are dancing in an open field, while we see Ariados nearby clinging to a tree and a Rowlet making eye contact with one of them. We wouldn't expect Ariados to eat the Oddish, but it isn't completely off the table in times of extreme need. The same could be said for Rowlet then. But more likely it is that both of our predator Pokemon have simply been attracted to the noise of celebrating Oddish and came to investigate and see if it was a meal they would be interested in. If not, then they only have to wait for some other Pokemon to gain interest and strike at them instead. On a grander scale, Pokemon will change with the seasons, migrating, changing their physiology, their habits, and more. Moltres, for example, is noted to arrive within spring, being known for this so much that it is the sign that spring has arrived. Venusaur in summer will become its most powerful in the summertime when there's more sunlight this time of year, allowing its flower to grow even larger and have a more vivid coloration. In autumn, much like crickets in some regions of our world, we find them being far more active and making their own sounds like xylophones. And then in winter, the habitat of Snowbird expands, allowing them to come down from the bases of their mountains to explore. All while we see Deerling in its 4 seasonal forms, each one best fit to help it camouflage, attract others of its kind, and more as it traverses the world. Their fur is meant to match the scent and color specifically of mountain grass every season. Expanding further and widening our scope, we find that Tropius change annually, the bunches of fruits around its neck ripening twice a year and being incredibly delicious to the point where people and Pokemon like to eat it. Luckily, it is happy to share with anyone who is kind to it, and after continually eating more of its favorite fruit, it will just grow more of it on its body. Close by to it, we see a Litten grooming itself as it sets its own body on fire and burns away all of its old fur twice a year, so no worries, it is perfectly safe. Though these cycles don't have to stop at moon cycles, day or night, or anything else we talked about either. The cycles can be weather cycles, as we find a special relationship between many Pokemon and weather, as they do not live lives completely separate from their environment. Ribombee hates the rain, as it washes away pollen that it has gathered on its body. As an adaptation against this, it has learned to be able to predict the weather from moisture levels and wind direction, something you can absolutely do naturally as well in the real world. It will only reveal itself though when there are a few clear days in a row.
But when things do get rainy, expect to see Pokemon such as Goodra waddling about. You might even get to see a Sliggoo evolve into one on a great rainy day. I also do love the tiny detail of Groudon being the cloud in Ribbonbee's background, and Kyogre being the puddle in this shot. Meanwhile, on days when blizzards blow through, Darmanitan comes down to where people live. It stashes food such as this citrus berry in the snowball on its head, saving it as a meal for later. And even when not incredibly sunny, Espeon will still walk about, using the fine hair that covers its body to sense air currents as a Dragonair flies above, gathering energy within the orbs on its tail as it then uses some of that energy to control the weather, though it may save most of said energy that it has gathered for when it is finally ready to evolve into Dragonite. Most Pokemon have the need to sleep in order to recover their energy. We studied Pokemon sleeping in all kinds of environments, including forests, plains, deserts, caves, bodies of water, and even tundras. Let's take a look at the different ways that they sleep, which have been classified into the following categories based on their characteristics: duration, location, body posture, temperature, and alertness. Starting with posture, Claydol are noted to levitate even while they sleep. Using their telekinesis, they're able to attain this, likely keeping it safe from other Pokemon that might wait on the ground, such as Ekans, who might get too curious. Apparently, even Ekans may sleep while wrapped around tree branches or trunks, curling itself into a spiral while it rests. Assuming this position allows it to quickly respond to a threat from any direction with a glare from its upraised head. This also helps protect its body overall by keeping it bunched together, much like if we were to lay down in the fetal position to protect our vital organs. And despite Claydol's affinity for floating, Baltoy balances skillfully on its one leg as it sleeps, much like a top that will never fall down. And with the dexterous tail of Aipom, it will wrap its tail around tree trunks so that even if it moves in its sleep, it will never fall out of the tree. Some Pokemon spend more than half of their day asleep. Others might sleep away their entire lives, or perhaps sleep for thousands or even hundreds of millions of years in a special form. Many of these kinds of Pokemon sleep for such long periods to store up their power without using much energy. In the case of the 900-pound or 400-kilogram Snorlax, it will start nodding off while eating its body weight in food, and then it manages to continue eating even while asleep, making its life all about eating and sleeping non-stop. In its dormant form of a great tree, Xerneas sleeps, and holy sh**, that's a Pokemon Snap reference! I know we were like in the zone and I'm like really here, but that is the exact Ruin and Golden smaller form that we see Xerneas take in Pokemon Snap for the Switch. I know with my audience I preach to the choir on this, but side games, the anime, the manga, they all have tidbits of canon lore throughout them. Not everything is canon, but then again, they don't really care about what is or isn't canon. Usually the audience is the only one trying to figure this out because the developers have basically already said there are infinite universes. So it's all just a matter of just figuring out timelines one day, and they're just having fun creating all of this for us. Back on track though, Komala is born asleep and dies asleep. All of its movements are no more than the results of it tossing and turning in its dreams. It holds tight to the log it was given at birth by its parents, and when it falls into a deep sleep, it stops moving altogether. It remains asleep due to the sedative properties of the leaves that form its diet, which is of course inspired by eucalyptus. Even the log it bears would be similar to the bark of the eucalyptus tree. Meanwhile, now that it has gotten colder at night, Sewaddle has not only covered itself in its clothes, but has also hidden itself within the leaves of our tree to not only stay warm, but also escape predators. All while Pinsir is known to sometimes dig itself into the ground with its horns to sleep in the soil, even covering itself in leaves if necessary. They just can't handle the cold all that well. As we move into more open fields, there are a number of Pokemon that have to adapt to waking up to or keeping watch over the area for any threats that may approach. One such threat, as one of many apex predators, is Luxray. It sleeps now as it is likely tired out from using its ability to see through anything in order to find prey that was hiding behind objects. They do sleep for long periods of time to then build up their energy. Others aren't as much of a threat, of course, as we then see Musharna. It drowses and dreams all the time. It's best to actually leave it be if it's just woken up, as it's a terrible grump when freshly roused from a dream. Yeah, that's also definitely my fiance. Me, not so much. I've been woken up by a megaphone before and didn't even jump, luckily. But it is noted, though, that Musharna has its eyes closed when awake and eyes open when asleep, making predators think that it is keenly aware of their presence.
A Slackoth eats only 3 leaves in a day and is satisfied with that. It helps a lot that their heart only beats once per minute, and it never really moves, meaning that it doesn't expend any real energy and never needs more than those 3 leaves, as it sleeps a total of 20 hours a day. Funnily enough, Mankey are even angry while they are asleep. They fall into an exhausted sleep after they wear themselves out from raging, but even then, it seems they are still angry even in their dreams. The one with the crossed arms, give me that one, please, I beg of you. As the book states though, Pokemon that live in open spaces with plenty of visibility can easily be spotted by enemies. Because of this, they often stay half awake even during their sleeping or take turns sleeping so that they can notice if an enemy were to draw near. With a very unique ability, we find Girafarig sleeping away while its tail stays awake, reacting to smells and sounds, biting anything that comes too close to the sleeping giraffe. The tail itself has no need to sleep whatsoever, a phenomenal trait for a prey species. Similarly to this, we find one head of a Doduo sleeping at a time, switching every single hour. I guess say goodbye to a proper REM cycle, but hey, at least they seem pretty organized and energized after a good night's rest. They even take turns when eating, making sure one of them is always on watch. More Pokemon on the lookout include Sentret. After all, they are named after Sentry, so they keep watch over the area for each other so their allies can rest. If there's any danger, it screeches and hits the ground with its massive tail, which could then explain why its evolution for it becomes so, well, tail-y. The incredible constant use of that appendage then allowed it to get a much larger one, much like Machop becoming Machamp with not only greater muscles, but more arms. It's incredibly important that Sentret actually stay together, because if they get separated from their pack, then they will panic and become incapable of sleeping due to fear. Hidden amongst the white flowers, camouflaged, we find a Flabebe with a white flower sleeping, making it harder for any predators to find it. All while nearby, we have a resting Snubble that growls all the time to hide its cowardly nature. This keeps others at bay that are intimidated by it, all while it's also pretty laid back and sleeps half of the day away. But amongst all of these Pokemon is one that is camouflaged better than all else, one that has taken the form of a rock, as Ditto rests peacefully amongst crowds of Pokemon, transforming as it deems fit to stay safe no matter where it goes. We then take a stroll over to the desert to see how our friends who enjoy hotter environments sleep now that the sun has gone down and the temperatures have dropped dramatically. It's difficult to sleep well if you're always getting too hot or too cold. That's why Pokemon may display various methods to keep their bodies at a comfortable temperature while they sleep. It's said that some bury themselves amid leaves or sand, for example, while others might huddle together in groups, as we've seen earlier. A number of desert dwellers do this, from Trapinch burying further into its sandy nest to Sandile, who submerges itself in the sand even when it isn't asleep. It moves through the sand as if swimming. Staying within the sun-warmed sand also helps keep its body temp from dropping. Similarly, we find Sandshrew burrowing into the desert sand to sleep, and Hippopotas covering itself in the sand that also helps protect it from germs. And to my surprise, we even find Sandslash sleeping up in a tree, as they are adept at climbing them. Plenty apparently park themselves right up there and fall right asleep, which is fantastic as it allows them to get berries, stay out of the sight of any predators, and even roll itself into a ball and drop down onto any prey they deem fit for a meal. Fortunately, it doesn't seem interested in the pair of Chimchar right below it, their butts not bearing flames as they extinguish it before falling asleep to prevent forest fires from breaking out. They even show that it is a little red butt that it has properly, as per one of its inspirations, the baboon. Though a mom's job who sleeps nearby is never done either, as Kangaskhan is always seen sleeping straight up to prevent it from crushing its baby who sleeps within its pouch. Meanwhile, a duo of Rattata are sleeping but are cautious to the extreme. Even while asleep, it constantly listens by moving its ears around. It's always ready to rouse itself and make a run for it in case it hears any noises that suggest any enemies are nearby. It's fortunate that they do eat anything that they can and are not picky about where they live, otherwise there'd be too much stress on their little mousy selves. Now we venture into caves where we find some more unique sleeping positions for Pokemon. Among the many species of Pokemon discovered, some sleep in surprisingly unusual positions. Others hunker down in a set posture so they are not swept away while asleep. pay attention to which parts of their bodies they use to anchor themselves. In the case of Swoobat, its suction cups its nose to the wall and holds itself there. When they leave, a heart-shaped mark is left behind. Sometimes they even detach while asleep still, and to quickly ensure that something didn't force them to do that, it uses ultrasonic waves to understand its surroundings quickly. We also see packs of Wynot, who tend to cluster in caves just like this, moving in a tight group that also helps them to train their bodies for the day that they will turn into a Wobbuffet. And deep within these caves, we are apt to find Carpink, a Pokemon that sometimes sleeps for hundreds of millions of years ever since they are born. They're occasionally found during the excavation of caves like this. Similarly to our Woobat, Beldum keeps itself floating by generating magnetic force to repel Earth's natural magnetism, but while asleep, they instead anchor themselves to a cliff using the hooks on its rear, something I actually didn't realize they would use that for. I just kind of figured it was just another way to grab prey someday. Now, as the full moon comes to a close and dawn arrives, we see Clefairy making their way back into the cave to rest within the quiet mountain, sleeping nestled against each other. There are other Pokemon that do avoid the sun here, such as Zubat, who has very thin skin. It would burn out in the sun, but it also needs to huddle close to other Zubat, as its skin is so thin that it makes it hard to stay warm without some extra help. More Pokemon found within these caves include Larvitar, who is born underground and eats large amounts of soil. As it does so and emerges to the surface, it begins to sleep so that way it can grow and evolve. And as a form of camouflage, we notice Geodude in this piece of art, but would otherwise be unable to notice it in the wild, as it is impossible to distinguish from rocks when it buries itself to sleep halfway into the ground. Because of this, people often step on it by mistake. As a quick note, I'm not sure what the formation is under the Zubat here. I thought maybe it was Larvitar eating away in a weird pattern, but it looks way too shiny and smooth and liquidy to be that. I couldn't find anything that was definitive, so I'm actually going to rely on you, my dear audience, to help me out on that. But now we dive into the deep sea, where a slew of aquatic critters live. In a comfortable environment, Pokemon can sleep soundly. Some always sleep while in the same spot. Other Pokemon wander in search of a place that they like. Some even make their own sleeping spots or take them from other Pokemon. There are a few Finian and Arrokuda amongst this coral reef floating as they sleep, and it is here that we find all these Pokemon that seem to have made a home within the branches of this coral reef alongside the growths of greenery. One that caught my eye was what must be a sleeping shelter, only its tongue visible under the matting that Clauncher is sleeping on. Meanwhile, we even get to see how Lovedisk makes its home not only in coral reefs, but how it and a pair of them sleep nestled in between the branches of Corsola, which I have wanted to see for so long since reading about that in the decks over and over again. Speaking of, Corsola are noted to make a living in warm, clean seas, resting here peacefully. And all of these fish may just be very lucky, as there are many predators here, such as Seadra. Those that approach one of these Pokemon while it is sleeping, hiding within coral, may get stung by the poisonous barbs on its back. This defense not only camouflages it, but also ensures that its vulnerable side is covered, buried in the coral, while its spikes protect its backside. In the cracks of this zone, we also find Octillery, who instinctively sneaks into rocky holes. If it gets sleepy, it steals the nest of a fellow Octillery, and now that its rocky den home has been taken over, a panicked second Octillery must brave the open zones and hope to not encounter any predators that are still awake. Hopefully it finds a small crack that it can slide into soon enough where no other Pokemon will be able to reach it. We even get to see Overquill here, showing once again that regional variants, even of the past, are not locked away to time and location, but rather they are only limited by needing strong enough conditions to induce their evolution. The tips of this Pokemon's poisonous spikes are even barbed, and they can't be easily removed once they've punctured something, much like a harpoon. Then we finally have Pokemon that are in our coldest reaches of the world, and Pokemon that avoid being discovered while asleep. When asleep, they are defenseless. Some Pokemon hide their bodies or imitate things in nature to avoid being discovered by other Pokemon while sleeping. We see this with Houndstone and Grievard, where only their protrusions are noticed above ground, otherwise making them seem just like a gravestone with a candle offering. They hardly move at all when buried under snow, and stick their heads above the surface occasionally as they wait for people to approach. We see Baneri again, its fur protecting it from the cold as we talked about with Lopunny, but it keeps one ear up so it can stay alert while the other is properly rolled up. By burying its body into its fur, it can keep itself from experiencing frostbite or cold in general, as its body can radiate the extra heat to the singular extended appendage without a problem, as it keeps its center warm. We do get to even see Vanillite sleeping while still breathing out cold air that helps cause it to snow in the area. It will bury itself in the snow for extra measure just to ensure that if it does get warmer, it will not shrink due to melting at all, but that's also why it releases so much cold even while asleep. In a shocking moment, we get to actually see Jirachi here encased within its hard crystal that protects it from enemies. If it senses danger, it can even defend itself while asleep, but this makes amazing sense that it would enjoy the cold, considering we also do find it usually sleeping within the cold stretches of space. But a strange case is that of Abra, who teleports to a new location every hour. Apparently, the more deeply it sleeps, the farther its teleportations go, which this may actually tie into why its evolved form emits alpha waves, something that is often associated with the brain while asleep, which then means that despite it causing televisions to glitch, I believe I have finally been proven wrong, and Kadabra does not emit radioactive waves as per the alpha particles in another Dex entry, and I love that I've been proven wrong. Moving on, we once again see Dugong, who loves to snooze on bitterly cold ice. Its pure white body even makes it hard for enemies to spot them on the frozen surface, so they can sleep peacefully without worry. Something similar can be said about Beartic and its fur, but it didn't find this ice. It actually will freeze seawater with its breath when it is ready to rest. But before we do close out with this chapter, it turns out I missed a Pokemon, because I did indeed see the Ditto, Sawaddle, and Shelder, but I missed this Snom climbing up a tree that was well camouflaged, which, well played, little guy. As the book explains, they blend into their surroundings in all different kinds of ways, making them hard to spot. Ditto, of course, transforms into anything. When it sleeps, it changes into a stone to avoid being attacked. Shelder uses its broad tongue to burrow a hole in the seafloor sand and then sleep in it. While it is sleeping, it closes its shell but leaves its tongue hanging out. This is likely because it is used as a fishing lure. Snom spits out thread imbued with a frigid sort of energy and uses it to tie its body to branches, disguising itself as an icicle while it sleeps. And lastly, for Sawaddle, Levani dresses it in clothes they made for it when it hatched. It now hides its head in its hood while it is sleeping. And this was only half of the book, and I have so much more to dig through. But this is all for today, as I will split this up into 2, maybe 3 parts overall in the next coming videos. Depends on how much I add to the book as I explain and everything that we kind of see, right? Next up, though, is how Pokemon interact with each other, a real meaty section that I live for. But I just want to say thank you so much for watching. I really hope you are geeking out about this as much as I did when I first read through all of this and saw all the artwork here. It's beautiful. I also want to thank members of the channel who you see on this screen now. Through their extra support, I'm able to take the time necessary to dig through this and deep dive through many topics as I provide quality content for everyone on this channel. If you want behind the scenes info, early access to videos, and members exclusive content like this list here that a new video just got added to, become a member for as little as $3 a month. Let me know literally anything this book got you excited for. I want to feel even more hyped up than I already am, and for you to hype each other up. I love reading comments, plus they appease the almighty algorithm alongside likes and shares. So I think I'm going to get right back to it. Maybe I'll have another video at some point to just break up the info, but we'll see what happens, and I'm just really invested in this and I really don't want to stop. In the meantime, though, check out my own Ecology series, as I've gone through nearly every single region, though I feel like at some point I need to remake Kanto. But that's neither here nor there. And then, as always, don't do anything I want to do, don't do anything I would do. Please be nice to each other. I love you, and I'll see you next time.